Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSA podcast. I am Craig King, your host, and we are back with the one and only Patrick Kelly, who, you know what, guys, he is just the man. Yesterday, I watched a PBS interview he did on social studies test scores. Did a great job, Patrick.
I appreciate it. I am fascinated to learn that you're a PBS viewer. I learned a lot about the PBS audience yesterday, but it was a good opportunity to talk about the importance of kids having a well-rounded education across the U.S.
For sure. So wrapping up, we have the final legislative week.
This is it.
Coming up.
If you're a child of the 80s and you're not singing the final countdown in your head right now, I just stuck it in your head. You're welcome.
Yeah, 3 days left, and we have a few things on the horizon. So let's hear what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we're really down to the end, and there's only a couple of lingering legislative issues for education policy. Now, there's a big asterisk on that. The end of session is this Thursday, May 11th. But without getting too dorky or weedy right here, the General Assembly is supposed to pass what they call a sine die resolution at the end of a session, which governs what the legislature can and cannot do when they're out of regular session. They haven't passed that or even introduced a sine die resolution. And if they don't do that by Thursday, they're not technically done. They will leave town. They're not scheduled to come the next week, but the Speaker could call the House back, the President of the Senate could call the Senate back, or the governor could call both chambers back. And when they come back, without a sine die resolution, they could work on any legislative issue. I mean, typically when they have a sine die resolution, it says we can come back to do only a list of things. Like last year, all they could do was come back to address vetoes by the governor, conference committee reports for pieces of the legislation the Senate and House differed on, and the issue of abortion coming out of the Dobbs v. Jackson case. They couldn't do anything else. Without a sine die resolution this year, it's all on the table after Thursday. Now, do I expect that there would be some sort of June surprise for education policy in South Carolina? No, I don't, but if anything's possible, it could happen. So, in theory, we're almost to the finish line with only a couple of things remaining.
So I know we have some interested parties. We this past week, we had Chesterfield Teacher Forum. One of the teachers there, a PE teacher from Chesterfield, who was also the bus driver for the teachers, was pregnant, and she was very interested in the paid parental leave. So tell us where we are with that. We got some pretty good news, right? We're not across the finish line yet, but
we got great news. If this is a 100-meter dash, we are on meter number 95, and we can just stagger and fall forward across the finish line. We got it. On Thursday, the Senate unanimously passed H. 3908, which would make educators, district employees in South Carolina eligible for the same paid parental leave benefit that was extended last year to state employees. There are a lot of legislators that have led on this issue, starting with Representative Neal Collins, who introduced the bill in the House several months ago. This week in the Senate, Senator Shane Massey, the Senate Majority Leader, set this bill to special order, which, without getting weedy and dorky, that moved the bill in front of all other pieces of legislation so it could get debated. Senator Sean Bennett from Dorchester, the K-12 Finance Subcommittee Chair, really helped shepherd this bill through the Senate, along with Senator Greg Hembry, the Senate Education Chair, who's also on the Finance Committee. And it's incredible. This bill has now unanimously passed the subcommittee in the House and the Senate, the full committee in the House and the Senate, and the full House and Senate. Not a single legislator has voted against this policy. That's remarkable in the year 2023. We struggle to pass resolutions like naming days of the month as like Women's Sporting Month or something right now, but this has been unanimous. It's not quite done, though. The Senate made some minor technical amendments to the bill, none of which PSTA considers to be bad in any way, shape, or form. They're just some cleanup. That's what the legislative process does. But that means the bill has to go back to the House, and the House has to concur with those amendments. Now, I'm pretty confident they will, but they still have to take the time to do it. And with 3 days remaining in the legislative session, time is the most scarce and valuable resource. It's going to take the House taking a moment to concur with the Senate. If they do, the bill goes to the governor, who has indicated he will sign it. So PSTA members need to check their legislative alert network email that went out, and they need to click the link on paid parental leave and act one more time. So for children of the 21st century, Hamilton the musical fans, now you're singing one last time in your head, courtesy of George Washington. That action will take 3 actions in one. It will email your senator saying thank you. It will email your representative saying please concur with the Senate. And it'll send a message to Governor McMaster saying please sign this thing when it gets to your desk. We can't stop. We're too close. This bill needs to pass this year. For teachers like the one in Chesterfield who are pregnant now, they don't need to wait till next year on this bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So some other items that, we've received some phone calls over was Representative Erickson's bill. I mean, I think when she introduced that a few weeks ago, a lot of teachers were very interested in that because of the flexibility and the freedom that it gives them. So talk about where we are right now and what teachers need to look forward to with that piece of legislation.
Yeah, that bill H4280, the Educator Assistance Act, was debated in the House on Wednesday and unanimously passed by the House. So it has cleared the House of Representatives, and it will now cross over to the Senate. Now, it is not going to become law this year. The Senate will not, there is no education subcommittee hearings in the coming week, so even though there's not time, they're not doing it anyway. The bill will start in January 2024 in the Senate, giving it a strong opportunity to become law next year. And of course, PSTA will be working hard to advocate for that because Representative Erickson's bill is really responsive to teachers. It's rare that a bill checks multiple boxes on the PSTA legislative agenda.
Yeah.
This one checks multiple boxes, and it's a credit to Representative Erickson that she listened to teachers on this one. In her own words, she wants to remove burdens on teachers and increase respect for the profession, and this is a bill that does that in several ways.
Well, that's good, Patrick. And so teachers, I know we've gotten some emails and even some phone calls about that piece of legislation, but because of the time restraints, we can't expect that to pass until next year at the earliest. Read to Succeed.
Yeah, Read to Succeed is going to be interesting over the next
I gave
week.
Patrick a weird face when I said that because I already know what's coming.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see. So the Senate passed a bill months ago that just eliminated Read to Succeed certification requirements. Those lovely courses that people have been shelling $85 out to take online for the last decade. The Senate got rid of those altogether. The House kept the Senate bill, but then they layered on 10 pages of updates to the overall Read to Succeed legislation. So not just teacher training and certification, but curriculum development, curriculum selection, curriculum purchasing, literacy screeners, retention policies, summer reading camps, interventions in grades K through 3. It is a comprehensive overhaul of that piece of legislation. And the House passed that unanimously this week. So it goes back to the Senate now. And the Senate has one of 3 options. The Senate can concur with the House amendments. The Senate can insist on their version and send their version right back to the House. Or they can ask for a conference committee with the House to work out differences. The bill just passed the House. The Senate was busy this week with other things, so they have not gotten to that Read to Succeed bill. On Tuesday, it is likely that bill will be read across the Senate desk, and at that point, we'll get a feel for what the Senate's going to do. PSTA will be advocating to, at minimum, make sure that original Senate version makes it to the governor's desk, because we know it is important for teachers to not have to pay for those courses anymore or invest that time anymore. So individuals that are interested in that, reach out to your senator and make sure that they know that it is important that the Senate, whatever action they take, it's got to be an action that keeps the Senate version of 418 alive so that teachers don't have to take those courses in the coming year.
Yeah, that's great. Great insight, Patrick, on that. We know we have a host of teachers, including one in my household, who would love to see that version pass. So anything else before we go for today? Before Patrick goes, we have our last Hill Day this week. We are inviting Sumter School District Teacher Forum on Tuesday. We'll have 20 educators from Sumter visiting the State House, and I have forewarned them that it is the last week of session and to be open for anything, but we're excited to have them come this week. So, Patrick, any final words before we sign off today?
Yeah, I mean, what the Sumter Teacher Forum is likely going to see is one big final education debate in the Senate. The House has nothing education-related remaining on their calendar, so unlikely the House does anything in the education space in the next week. But the Senate still has one really big bill on the calendar. That's the Transparency Act that has been working through the legislative process for the last 2 years. The Senate started debate on that bill this week. They debated it for about two hours plus on the floor, but didn't get to amendments. And then they got stuck on other issues because it's the end of session, and the Senate calendar is literally, on Thursday, it was 38 pages long in terms of the number of bills on the calendar. But that Transparency Act is a priority. It was set for priority status this week. It is likely it will be debated again in the coming week. And this time they'll get to amendments and they'll get to an actual vote, most likely. I mean, that's the thing. In the last week, everything's on the table, and you got 46 senators with 46 agendas that only have 3 days to try to get things done. And so everybody's going to be jockeying for time and position. But if there is any education policy of big sweeping substance likely to get action this week, it is the Transparency Act. And it's important to note that one's already passed the House. Now, the Senate has amended it, so it's different than the House version. They amended it by removing what PSTA considered to be the most troubling portions of the House version. So if the Senate passes the bill as it stands this week, it'll go back to the House, and then the House will have the same range of options the Senate has right now under Reid to succeed. They could concur with the Senate changes to the Transparency Act. They could insist on their version, or they could request a conference committee. So this thing's not done even coming out of this week, but it's going to be a primary focus in the Senate. So if members have strong opinions on the Transparency Act, we're asking members at minimum to reach out to your senator and ask them to hold their ground on the Senate Education Committee version and not allow amendments that would return the more troublesome, dangerous provisions of the House bill to the Senate bill on the floor, because that could happen. Those provisions that got struck out in committee could come right back by amendment. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So if you need a recap of that in print, make sure you view your legislative update that went out today in your email inbox. So Patrick, thanks for coming again. Standing appointment today, guys. He actually came to me saying, I'm ready to record. So, I didn't have to knock down his door begging for him to come record the podcast this week. So
I'm in the office next to you. So I didn't.
Yeah,
don't give me too much credit here.
They didn't need to know that. But anyway, it's been another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I'm Craig King, your host. Have a great week.